Today we're going to be talking a little bit about outreach planning kind of throughout the year, managing and planning, and what folks' strategies are or questions that you have. I know yesterday we sent some questions, not that you had to prepare or do any homework at all. I do have some guiding questions, but it's kind of a free-form conversation. So if you have questions or comments or tips or tricks, we'd love to hear all of that. But before we get started, maybe do some brief introductions, and I'll just start. So hi, I'm Krista Mastel. I'm one of the outreach and instruction coordinators at the University of Minnesota, and I'm specifically on the St. Paul campus, so I coordinate on the St. Paul campus libraries over here. Amy, do you want to start?
Hi everyone, I'm Amy Wainwright. I'm the Outreach and Student Engagement Librarian at John Carroll University just outside of Cleveland. I am your friendly backup facilitator and note taker, so for the most part I probably won't include myself in the conversation unless I feel some kind of like burning need. So I'll be kind of quietly muted here taking notes. So thank you everyone.
All right, thank you. How about Charissa? Or Carissa, sorry.
Hi, yeah, it's my name is Carissa Powell. I'm the undergraduate experience librarian at Kansas State University. So I do outreach and instruction with new undergrad students.
Awesome. Thanks. And let's see, next on my list, how about Ilka? Oh.
Hi, yes, I'm here. It just took me a while to find myself. So I am Ilka Doddick. I'm the head of instruction outreach at Nazareth College in Rochester, New York.
Perfect. Thanks for joining us. And how about Laura? Oh, yeah, there we go.
Sorry, I'm on an iPad, so I'm getting used to this. My name is Laura Wilson. I'm an outreach librarian at College of the Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts.
Thanks. And last but not least, how about Serena?
Hello, you can't see me, but I'm a reference and instruction librarian at Nova Southeastern University, and myself and 3 other librarians, we work on the outreach with the undergraduates.
Nice, nice. Thank you all. And based on like our colleges and a little bit that I probably know about you, lots of different sizes kind of represented here, which is kind of nice, so we can hear how that also plays a role into all of our planning and coordinating. So I guess I'll just kind of kick it off with just a kind of a general question of how you coordinate the various outreach activities kind of throughout the year, and what obstacles do you encounter when planning? If you want to talk a little bit about that, if you do happen to use like a software to help you plan, I would love to know that. But yeah, does anyone have any thoughts on strategies or how you go about coordinating kind of throughout the academic year?
Well, I can go ahead and start. Our outreach at Kansas State is coordinated through one office in the library, which is really nice. So everyone coordinates with one individual for events that are going on. And I think that did arise from, I know a later question is, have you ever had too many events going on at the same time? And I think that's part of how that came to be. I have only recently started using a software in terms of project management. I'm using, it's called Planner through Office 365, but it's very similar to Trello or Asana. The problem is that if you coordinate with groups who don't use Office 365, they don't have access to it. So that's been my one hiccup with using that software so far.
Do you have like, does most of campus at least have that software? I'm just
Yeah, most of campus has the software. I think there's that initial trying to train others how to use the software, and sometimes we've had some people who are like, no, that's it's too much of a learning curve. Let's just go Google Docs and email, and that's okay too. But so for our core planning teams, we've been trying to use the planner and just making sure that we have everything in one place. I think it'll be really helpful in terms of if I ever turn a project over to someone else, because all of your files can live there. It tracks everything you do in terms of getting a project off the ground. So when I've only been in my job 2 years, and so I'm thinking back to if someone else had used this, I'm like, oh, that would have been really helpful.
Mhm. Yeah, nice. Thank you.
So I can go next. So one of the things that I'm just starting to work with is an editorial calendar. Has anybody else ever used that? No?
Could you share a
We'll
little
have to go
more
by
on
visual
what
cues.
that is?
So yeah, I have it. Well, so mine is a Google Sheet, but essentially it's from content strategy, so like UX people, but they got it from journalism. So if you think in journalism, you have to plan at least probably a month ahead of time, like what stories you're going to run at which time. And so some people in outreach use an editorial calendar to say like, okay, this month is, you know, especially in libraries, like this is African American History Month or Women's History Month, and then you can use that to sort of plan some things. But also within the calendar, you have campus events, like I have hours changes, just so that each week I can look at it and be like, okay, so this is something that I could be publicizing in our various communication outlets. And then we also have LibCal. I don't know if other people have that, but we don't use it to its full capacity, I don't think. So, so I'd be curious to hear if other people are using that one.
Oh, thanks.
I could go next. So I don't use anything fancy. We have an outreach committee here that I'm the head of, and we use our Google Calendar, which is easy for us because we can all share with our email addresses connected through our campus. So we use Google Calendar to plan out everything. We have one large planning meeting in the summer. We identify the big events on campus that we want to support. And we also use Google Sheets for things like social media to connect in with our events that we have going on in the calendar.
Nice. So that all kind of plays together. You're using Google Sheets and Google Calendar and kind of talking to each other and scheduling things out. Nice.
Yep.
Very cool.
I'll go. Ours is kind of similar. We put everything in a calendar, and we recently just got LibCal from SpringShare. So we've been playing around with that, which is interesting. But basically, we use the calendar style. So we kind of plan things out leading up to the semester and put it all in the calendar so it doesn't conflict with anything.
Nice. Yeah, I like how a lot of you are commenting on how you tie into other university events, or if you know of big things that you're tying into that. So I think those are some great strategies. So that kind of brings up like, how flexible are you all to, like, you know, some big news event, you know, happened locally or nationally, and you want to do some outreach or programming around that. So I'm just kind of curious, do you feel like you can kind of whip up something on the fly, or do you feel kind of it's kind of planned out, so you're kind of set in stone? I know locally here in Minnesota, we have an outreach kind of group that includes public librarians. And of course, they have to schedule out like a full year. So most library systems, public library systems are not flexible, as nimble as, say, I can be in my, you know, one of 12 libraries. I can just kind of do something on the fly and kind of beta test something out if I want. But I'm just kind of curious what other folks' experiences are.
I'll go. We're flexible in that if someone else asks us to do something, we can. But as far as us like whipping up something, we generally don't because we're so busy, especially during the fall. Like we already have a million other things to do. But for instance, for like Earth Day, the student club, they're called the Green Sharks because the shark is our mascot. They asked us to come to their event and bring some resources and help them out with their table. And so when things like that comes up, we generally just send out a call to the department, see who's available, and try to fit it in that way. But we don't generally just whip up events ourselves. It's usually someone asking us to partner or help them out.
I feel like we can do little things on the fly. Like maybe we already have things that are going on for finals week, but if we add like one more thing in, like that's not the end of the world. I do think a lot of the issues with doing things not last minute, but kind of on the fly runs into a lot of resource issues. So in terms of like physical space or advertising it. And so it's less about like, can I have a person there? It's more like those nitty-gritty details that those are easier to have worked out several months in advance. I do agree with what Serena was saying about the fall semester is I feel like if there was a time of year that's more rigid and less flexible, it's the fall semester here. And that's because there's already so many things going on campus that have been planned out almost a year in advance.
I would actually say the majority of our events are sort of on the fly or ad hoc. I mean, we use LibCal to try to schedule, like we have a display space in the library. And so there are certain times of year when people want to do that. Like we have scholarly publications in September or like the art therapy group has their artwork up in the late spring. But other than that, it seems like we're constantly like looking for ideas at the last minute. That's partly why I'm here, to try and get some more ideas because I don't mind it and it usually works fine. And, you know, we're a small library, so we can do that, but it would be nice to just have more things like planned out.
Yeah.
I think for us here, I'd echo the idea that we can do small things on the fly. So for example, I put out a call to our student group organizations, asking them if they would like to do a book display to support their events that they're doing on campus. And usually they'll reach out within, you know, a week before the events do. So they want to have the book display up in 2 days, and that kind of stuff we're pretty flexible with. But in terms of doing some sort of programming or workshops, that's something that, you know, with the fall semester, we're all teaching, we're all doing reference, we're all doing committee work, all sorts of things. So it's not something that we can effectively do with on the fly, unfortunately. I'd like to, but it's not feasible.
Yeah, great comments. Yeah, we're a mixture of, and those of you that have year out planning, I'm so jealous. We're like in the midst of orientation planning for just 2 months from now. So yeah, we're not as year round planned as some of you, which sounds kind of dreamy. And I'm just kind of curious, how do you all ensure that you're kind of reaching various constituents? Like, do you build programming, for undergrads versus grad students versus faculty and staff? How do you target different groups? And how do you maybe scaffold different outreach events? And I know outreach sometimes can include instruction. Some people don't include instruction in outreach, but if you want to talk about like how do you reach different audiences and how do you maybe scaffold or build an outreach program, if you have any thoughts on that.
Something my university did that I thought was really interesting. We had a reorganization about 1.5 years ago. And so 2 departments kind of merged. And out of that, they created a huge like Excel document, and everyone listed out every organization, department, group on campus that they outreach to. And it was really interesting to see where the gaps were, where we were and where we weren't. And so we added onto the list, even if you didn't outreach to a group, like if you thought about someone that like, oh, I've been meaning to reach out to this group, but it's been at the bottom of my to-do list for the last semester. And visually that was really helpful to me to just see what everyone was doing, and it helped me learn about what some of my other colleagues were doing in terms of outreach. We do outreach to different groups, like you were saying. Like we have a graduate workshop series that has been going on for several years now and is pretty successful. It's very like self-sustaining at this point. We're trying to get an undergraduate workshop series off the ground, and we piloted it this past spring semester, and that had like rock year. So we're rethinking it over the summer to revamp in the fall. So yeah, those are a few things that we've been doing.
Nice, thank you. Other thoughts?
I'll go. With our university, it's a little tough because the majority of our population on campus is undergraduate. And so most of our graduate students are online. So with them, we generally, whatever workshops we offer are broadcast through GoToTraining as well. So with them, we try to reach out to them that way. And I've recently been posting, like, we have a course in Blackboard for the library. So I'll post Blackboard announcements, letting them know what's coming up that's actually online that they could participate in. But it is kind of tough. And it's funny she mentioned that we had a fresh undergraduate workshop series, but because there was so little attendance, we kind of stopped doing that. So it's hard. We're trying to find other ways to reach different groups, but it's a challenge.
Yeah, we've been in the same boat here. Like we offer various workshops, but it's almost always like, it's really geared for graduate students because the undergrads don't. However, we have sometimes done like a little jump start one day, like 3 hours, and you learn all these tips and tricks, and right before or the first week of class, and that depending on has kind of worked. So with undergrads at least. Anyone else?
Here what we do, we're entirely undergraduate. So we've been kind of building our outreach program incrementally. So I'd say we've been focusing a lot on our freshman students, and in the fall we have orientation fair, and we invite them to that, and we do some other fun activities that everyone is invited to, but we kind of really heavily market towards first year experience classes and reach out to the faculty and ask them to share the information with their students. So we're starting to build that way. We've already targeted the freshmen, we have a good foothold on that. So this year we're going to start focusing on the faculty themselves, as you had mentioned. We're going to start to do a couple events specifically around them, where we're starting a faculty book talk series where campus authors can come and talk about a book or an article they recently published. So they'll have a forum to discuss their research with their colleagues, as well as any interested students. And we're also planning to do a faculty reception within the library, just to try and get a foothold with faculty, because we know that the faculty are the key to getting into the students. So I think that's our strategy for this upcoming year.
Nice. Thanks for sharing.
If I could add on to that, the faculty outreach, the subject specialist, but they do have a workshop series for faculty, and it's been growing. One of the biggest things, they have a Power Publishing Day where they invite different vendors, database vendors to come in and talk about getting published in academic journals and predatory publishing and things like that. So that's been really big. And we do just different workshops like tech lightning rounds, and it's really been working getting the faculty involved.
Sort of related to that, we just recently did a faculty and staff user survey, and one of the questions that we asked was what services were you most interested in receiving from the library, and one of those was talking about impact factor and predatory publishing. So that is something that we're going to try to work on this year, but I just haven't really thought about how I want to push that information out to people, because I don't think people would come to a workshop. As much as I would love to do a workshop and see people face to face, I just know the way that things go on our campus and people are just like way too busy. So it'd probably have to be something online.
If I can jump in, I would say that we just did a faculty workshop this week. It's a series that we've done for the past few years where it's a full day workshop, and we talk about different topics with them. And I love the idea of talking about them about publishing and getting published. So that's something that I'd like to share with my colleagues here. But the way that we get faculty in is we actually have a grant from our Center for Teaching on campus where we pay them to attend. And that is the incentive that brings them in. So we're fortunate enough to have that, but it works.
Another thing we found, because the first time we did it, the attendance wasn't that great. And we realized with faculty, it was better when we scheduled out the whole year worth of workshops and we put it in every faculty member's mailbox. And we got more attendance that way, because that way they could plan accordingly because they're so busy, and having the year's worth of workshops already planned out kind of helped as well.
Yeah, since I'm on the St. Paul campus, which most people view as the ag campus, all of our faculty take off in the summertime and are doing field trials and other things. So we found to do, we just got done doing a week-long research sprint. So again, they had to apply, so it was kind of selective, or we touted it as selective. I think we took everyone, but so they really hunkered down for a whole week and worked on their research. So they helped. We had data management folks, experts, liaisons that focus on that. We had some Dash, kind of digital humanities folks and website folks to help in those areas, some writing consultant folks, so that kind of a whole slew of folks. And it was very people labor intensive, but the faculty certainly were very happy with that. And I think over the years that will kind of spread the word of mouth kind of model. But it seems like the week after grades are due, at least for my part of campus, is the time to snag them before they disappear for summer. So another thought that we had was, I'm just kind of curious, I'm trying to get better at doing this, but writing learning objectives, outreach objectives for all of the events and campaigns and other things that I'm doing, so I can better assess and figure out if I'm reaching the targets or not. So I'm just curious what other folks' experiences are. Do you try to match it to institutional or library learning objectives or information literacy, framework components or something like that? And do you do any kind of assessment? I'd be kind of curious what all you are up to.
I can speak about this, and I also struggle with that. So the big outreach event that's happening right now is we have orientation all month, and we have a libraries booth at the browsing fair. And so some of my learning outcomes are very touchy-feely. So for orientation, it's incoming first-year students, and my learning outcome is that I want them to think of the library as a friendly place and partner in research. So that's very like things based. And so sometimes I struggle because those are hard to assess. The other really big outreach event I do is in the fall semester during our week of welcome. And that does have more concrete learning outcomes where they are learning about different services in the library. They're learning about how to use some of those services, when to identify that they don't know something and need to ask a question. In terms of assessment, we do a lot of like, I don't like to rely on numbers, but we have been relying on numbers. So taking attendance and really just trying to ask the questions of like, what is the most important thing you learned from this event? And that's been really telling to me because sometimes some of the things that I think are the really cool things, they say something else and I'm like, oh, they were really impressed by the 3D printer. Like, so yeah, those are some of my thoughts and feelings, and I don't think I have it all figured out, but trying to get there.
So here at my library, we have a brand new director who came in, and he's kind of really taking, I don't know, direction of where we're going and putting us on a path where we haven't been down before. So one thing that he did was he created a tagline for the library where our new tagline is engage more, discover more, learn more. And what he's asked me to do is take our outreach events and tie each event into some part of the tagline. So one of our events have to either engage more, help students discover more, or help students learn more. And he does a strict definition of what that means. But for me and the outreach team, we have to ensure that our events are falling into that category. So this is brand new for us. So this is the year that we're figuring out how to do that and then how to assess whether or not we were successful in tying that into our tagline.
Yeah, for this one, I'll just say I don't have much to add, so I'm just listening to people.
Same here. I'm trying to think of if we assess. I think we kind of assess by numbers as well. A lot of I agree with what Carissa said. A lot of what we do is like feelings based or like, perception based. So it's kind of hard to assess it.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we all need to keep working on and investigating what are kind of some of the best approaches or ways to go about it. So I know for our orientation, we're looking at doing a secret shopper this year to have one of our student workers from a different library come in and kind of experience it to give us some feedback on just the flow, some of the mechanic, like the student engagement pieces. So that's kind of a new way that we're going to try to assess one of our big, like 4,000 student events. So that's something that we're doing.
I will chime in here. I'm going to break my silence. I will say the one thing that I can add is Laura, yes, I'm sorry. Taking notes, I'm like shortening people's names. Laura, I'm in a similar place to what you said where we essentially, and I think this also maybe kind of bookends into what maybe Carissa said earlier. Essentially, we created a huge list of, it's mostly all of our partners that we work with in the library, but each of our partners contributes. We do different events with them. So we have like this huge list of events and partnerships. And then we also have our campus strategic goals. And they have different things like leadership, learning, reflection. We're a Jesuit institution, so reflection is pretty big. So we basically have those goals, and then we went through our list and kind of tried to see which of our events maps to which of the different, like, is it working on reflection, is it working on leadership, that kind of thing. But this is a new enough process that I haven't figured out how to assess all of these things. I mean, some of them it's like reflection. I keep coming back to that one because it's easy. It's very clear, like, are the students reflecting or not? Like that's a clear one, but some of the rest of them are a little bit more difficult. So I'm still trying to figure out that assessment piece a little bit.
Thanks for sharing, Amy. Let's see here. I'm also just kind of curious about your structure. I mean, some of you have hinted at it before. Do you have like a committee? Is it one person? Is outreach written into like everyone? If you have liaisons, you know, what is kind of the structure and support for kind of coordinating events that you have at your institution? Yeah.
I can speak. It's written into, I want to say, almost every public-facing person's position. So it's good in some ways because it really shares the responsibility. It's not all on one person or one unit. I do think where it gets dicey is the communication and making sure that if there are bigger type events happening, that they're not happening at the same time, or that there's enough resources to go around. So everyone has it written into their position description. Everyone does something. But like I said, we do all coordinate through one office in the library. So our communication and marketing department, we all go through them in terms of getting marketing materials we need, just letting them know, hey, we have an event going on. They put it in a large calendar. So yeah, those are a few things that we do to make sure that everyone's in loop.
I can talk. So my position is head of instruction and outreach, but it's relatively new. So I've been here a year, and before that, there was no outreach in anyone's job title whatsoever. So for this year, it has been just me trying to do outreach, but what I want to do is form a committee. So if anybody has ideas on like best practices for that, that would be great, because and one of the reasons why I made this editorial calendar is it should make it easier for me to distribute the load in terms of publicizing events, because we'll have a calendar of when things are supposed to be scheduled. But yeah, I mean, I would love to have more people involved in outreach, because I always just feel like it's unfair to the library to just have me doing it, because there are definitely parts of the library that I just don't see, and so those don't get publicized as much.
I'll speak on that because our setup is kind of complex. So we're a joint use library, so we're public and academic. Within the academic side, only 4 of us do the outreach. So we kind of coordinate it, but what we'll do is we usually send out a call for the rest of the reference department, so the subject specialists and liaisons, based on their schedules when they could help out. And as part of our like goals for the university, we all have to do some type of, community student engagement thing. So it's part of the entire university has certain goals they have to meet. So we'll usually send out a call, and they'll help out when they can with certain events. We're kind of the 4 main ones. But we send out polls, and they just respond when they're available. And then certain events, we also send out polls to the public librarians as well to see when they can help out. So we try to make it a team effort. We basically do all the coordinating, but they help out when they can. And then the faculty outreach is just basically the subject specialist, and they do the same thing. If they need help, they'll send out a call to us.
What an interesting setup. Serena, does it go the other way then too with the public librarian side, that they reach out to you, or do you partner on community-based programming?
Yes, it depends on the event. So like the big events, definitely. So like every March we have Seuss Fest, which is a huge event. This past year we had like thousands of people. So they'll send out a call to the entire library. They'll send out a call to like community volunteers, everyone. And so the big events, yes. I'm trying to think. Smaller events, it depends. They might just have one or two people that they need for certain things, and if that's your specialty, they may ask you. But mainly for bigger events, because they also have their like teen volunteers and people like that.
Right. Thanks. Very interesting. Any other comments?
Oh, sure. So here we have an outreach committee. As the only outreach librarian here, I'm the head of the committee, but we have 6 members. We had 8 last semester, but a couple people got too busy to participate. I inherited the committee, so I wasn't here when it was formed, but from what I understand, it came down from library administration, where they thought that this was important to have a committee, to have representation from the different branches, because we're a small school, but we still have 5 branch libraries. So we have different representation from them, different departments, things like that. And they put out a call to, the administration put out a call to the library staff asking who was interested. And I think that's how we had our committee formed. But we meet on a regular basis. And it's great because I get a lot of feedback from the branch libraries that on issues that I would have never thought of, and how even though they're, 200 yards down the street, like their culture is a lot different than what it is in the main library. So they have some great input on things that we could do or wouldn't work so well for their users.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, lots of different structures, which is good to see. Hopefully, Ilka, you're getting some ideas here of some best practices or different approaches that you could go about. So great. Let's see here. What else? I'm curious because I bet in fall, as we've all kind of been hinting at, that fall is like big push time in the outreach world. So how do you prevent burnout for yourself and for staff, and like all the calls for volunteering for different things? How do you manage all of that? So, and how do you take care of yourself? I'm just kind of curious.
This is volunteer burnout is actually something we've been discussing at a library-wide level right now, because we are understaffed and we're sensing that we're trying to do more with less and people are getting tired. So there's like me personally, and then everyone who volunteers for my events. I think something that I've had to do is be okay with the fact that I don't have to be the person at every single event. Because when I first came into my position, I love what I do. It's very exciting. I want to be at everything. And so I try to limit myself to a maximum of 1 late night event a week on campus or in the library. Sometimes in the fall semester, that's not possible, and that's okay. But trying to manage that internal expectation I have of myself and say it's okay to ask other people for help and to have them be here. Library-wide, I think we're just seeing that a lot of the same people volunteer for everything, and they're not complaining. Like, I haven't heard anyone say like, I am tired of volunteering at everything. But it's more of like an observation that a lot of planners have noticed. So for orientation, there's a browsing fair for 4 hours a day, 5 days a week for 3 weeks. Like it's a lot. And last year I worked almost every single day at our browsing fair. And at the end of June last year, I was like, I can't do that again. So this year I went and presented at an all-staff meeting at the library. Just gave an overview of what the events are like, what to expect from working an outreach booth. And right now I'm only signed up for 4 days out of the 3 weeks. And my library just like, they all stepped up and stepped in. And so I'm really excited about that. Like I'm kind of like not surprised. Like I know that I can get their support, but I was like, oh, like this feels really different. So I guess my advice would be asking for help when you can and knowing when to step back. And that I'm also still learning.
I think that one thing that I've done over the past year is learning to say no to things. When I first started, I felt, I don't want to say pressure, but I felt like, oh, you know, any opportunity that came up, we have to do this and we have to support this. And I definitely think that burnout happens, and it happens quickly, especially if you're doing instruction or other duties on top of that. So I think planning ahead helps where, okay, well, we know we're having these 3 big events this month, and maybe it's fine to support the student book displays, but anything else that someone might think of, hey, this is a great event, maybe we can pull it off within the month. It's okay to say, we don't have time to plan it and do it well for this year, but let's put it on the list for next year of possible events that we could try to revisit, and maybe we can pull it off with more time to plan. So I think for burnout, for me, one thing is just learning to say no, or learning to say, let's take a look at this when we have more time to revisit it and plan it with more time.
I completely agree. I think one of the things we started doing was scheduling less outreach during those first couple of weeks of the semester because we were so instruction heavy. And this past fall was the first year we got our first year experience class. And so adding that to our already heavy instruction schedule, I know a lot of people were very stressed out. Those first 2 weeks, I was like running around every single day. But I think what helped was a lot of the subject specialists don't teach as many classes as us. So they would help it. They want an opportunity to teach again. So they would take some of our classes and we'd go do different things. So it kind of balanced out that way. And also sometimes after teaching 3-4 classes a day, you're like, ooh, an outreach event where I can just stand here and interact with the students. So during the fall, the outreach was less stressful than the instruction. So more people wanted to do that anyway. So, but yeah, now we schedule things so like we have more outreach towards the end of the semester when we're less busy.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I am trying to do this upcoming year, I should say, is to get more instruction taught by other librarians in the library. And so for me, part of that is hard because it's hard for me to let go. I'm like one of those people that I want it done like a certain way, but I am sharing all the lesson plans, and we have Google Docs and, you know, all that good stuff where you share everything so people can have the same sort of template. But yeah, burnout isn't so much a problem. It's more just that I think outreach would be better if more people were involved here. It's not so much that I'm burned out on it. I just want it to be better.
Yeah, I know that's a challenge. I'm at a large institution for especially my big orientation day where there's 4,000 students coming through the library, it's the usual suspects that are volunteering, a lot of the kind of public service instruction liaisons. And if any of you have strategies on how to like convey the message to like the cataloging and web development and those folks, that what you do impacts like these students. So, you know, this is a great opportunity to, in a snapshot, you know, meet some students, feel the energy that freshmen bring to the university, and that not all people have to be super outgoing and rah, rah, rah at every single event that we do. There's a time and place for everyone. Sometimes I just need more bodies. And that's something I know I'm always looking at for better approaches, if anyone has any.
Yeah, something that I went and presented to my all staff meeting about was outreach anxiety, because a lot of people expressed to me that they would love to help, but they're really like, they don't feel like they're outgoing people. They don't feel like they can be cheery and super friendly and represent the library that way. So we actually just had a conversation about what are some of your fears about working an outreach event? Like, how can I support you? Actually having those conversations, I think, helped. And I got some people who I've never seen volunteer for an outreach event before are volunteering this month. So that's like a little personal victory.
I love that idea. I'm stealing that. Thank you.
I might steal that idea too. I think that's something that we also struggle with, where our volunteers are the same usual suspects who are pretty much all in public facing positions, which is understandable, but I think that our back of the house staff has some anxiety as well. So I would love to try that and see if it would work with us. So thanks for sharing that.
So you all are rock stars, and we kind of ran through the general gist of some prepared questions that I had, but we have a little bit of time left. I don't know if folks, you know, Ilka, if you had specific questions that you wanted, or if anyone wants to share some summer outreach activities you're doing, or just some general thoughts that maybe we didn't have, that didn't naturally kind of bubble up through the questions. So I'll just kind of leave this last little bit if anyone has other questions or comments to kind of add in.
I had one question, and I don't think it came up, but does anybody do special outreach for staff? Because we have a situation on our campus where a lot of the staff are actually also grad students, like maybe taking one class at a time. So I was just wondering if anybody had any fun ideas for that group of people.
We participate, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. We participate in a campus-wide benefits fair where staff are usually the main attendees, but it's open to faculty and staff. And it just lets the staff know about dental plans, insurance policies that are available. And so we have a table at that, and we try to make it known to staff that the library is your library too, and here are your services. You can ask reference help if you're taking courses somewhere else, etc. But we don't do any standalone events on our own, but that's how we do something for our staff.
We have a number of people within the library who are pursuing degrees, and then also on campus. And so I'm not pursuing a degree, but I've been invited to several like writing groups. And so having something like that, like maybe calling it a support group is too cliche, but it's been very helpful to have a set group where, you know, we meet at this coffee shop every Tuesday at this time, and you just hang out and write together. So maybe the library could sponsor something like that. I had a question if we still have time. So some of the conversations we've been having about outreach, because we are understaffed and are feeling like there's a lot going on, we're having these conversations about what is the value of outreach. And I was wondering if other libraries have those conversations, if you have any insight you could provide. This is one of the reasons that I'm really trying to amp up the assessment on our outreach as well, is to prove that yes, it's touchy-feely, but it's also very meaningful. So any thoughts or advice on that front, I would welcome.
Um, I have to say, I think just getting students aware of the library and that we're friendly and approachable, that the summer orientation outreaches and weeks of welcome, I find that that's really what brings students in. We give out little giveaways. So like last fall, we had little squishy sharks and these little like drawstring shark bags with fins that they went like within the hour, like the students were obsessed with them. Um, but they were just so excited just that we're there and giving them something. And so they're curious, they come in and they're like, oh, I remember your face. So they're able to you know match a face with us. I think it just helps them feel a bit more comfortable about approaching us in the future, because you know research and the library for some students is just intimidating. It's a foreign, scary concept. So I feel like just making them more familiar about what we do. Another outreach we recently started like last year, the students have what they call See Thursday, where all the student organizations have their tables and there's a DJ, blah, blah, blah. So we did a takeover for National Library Week where we had tables, but each table was a library department. So that way, some of the departments that they don't interact with, they got to interact with them and learn about what they do for them. So that was another helpful outreach, because a lot of the students didn't know about some of these services. Like, we tell them about document delivery, ILL, and all this, but when they get to actually talk with these people face to face, I don't know, something about that human interaction makes it more comfortable for them.
And Carissa, I'll chime in too. Just, I think you're on the right path if you really think about keeping things essentially kind of assessment focused. And I mean, there is, even Serena, what you had mentioned, there is that, I mean, there is an actual, place in the research that talks about students and library anxiety. I mean, I completely understand fears kind of around this. I don't, and again, I'm sorry, since I'm like taking notes, I'm like picking up all these pieces of information. I would also, as much as possible, try to look at, if you have a university or a campus strategic plan or strategic goals, start thinking about how what you do to work with the students and outreach to students and make students feel comfortable and welcome, all of those things directly does tie in. I feel like sometimes it may be easy for us in outreach to think like, oh, we're just doing these fun things. That means it's not very impactful, but I mean, it really is. It's very important for what we're, helping our campuses. And even if you start thinking about student retention, and we've started talking about, there's like high impact practices and student thriving, going but beyond even just that basic keeping students on campus. So I guess I think you're on the right path. I don't really have very specific pieces of advice, but there is definitely research to back up like why what we're doing is important.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. Does anyone else have one more quick question that they'd like to ask the group? We just have a couple minutes. doing my instruction thing of like waiting and waiting. Give ample opportunity. So it was really nice to meet you all. I hope you'll join us. I think we're kind of taking a break, the outreach committee, for the rest of the summer because we're all busy, and some of you lucky people are on 9 or 10-month contracts, even though you're probably still working. But hopefully we'll see you again in the fall. Just so you know that you'll get an email from us later today or tomorrow with a little survey link. So we'd love your feedback on how this discussion went. And if you have any other topics that you would love us to like address down the road, we would love to hear what those are. Otherwise, feel free to connect with us on ALA Connect, and you'll be able to read notes there of the other days. So you might get some take a peek at the summary once we post that. And then, of course, this YouTube live session will be up on our YouTube channel. But otherwise, I'd just like to thank you for your time and your expertise. And I learned a lot, and it was just a joy to meet you.
Thank you for hosting and facilitating.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.